Whispers of the Ancients, East Asia, Episode 3, The Zhou Dynasty, Mandate of Heaven, Echoes of Eternity C, 1046 to 56 BCE, Ancient China when Heaven Speaks. Long before dragons danced in silk-painted scrolls, before emperors were draped in yellow robes and sealed by jade, there was a whisper in the wind, a whisper not of men, but of heaven. It did not thunder, it judged, and it passed its mandate, not to the strongest, but to the most just. Thus rose the Zhou Dynasty, a people who toppled kings not with arrogance, but with the solemn claim that heaven had withdrawn its blessing. Their rule would span 8 centuries, cradling sages and warlords, planting the seeds of Confucius, of ritual righteousness and cosmic balance. Come now, walk among ancestral altars and royal courts. Hear the clanging chimes of bronze. Feel the tremors of states rising and falling like breaths under heaven's gaze. The Zhou were not merely rulers, they were caretakers of order, authors of philosophy and heralds of the Chinese worldview. 1. The House of Zhou, born from rebellion, blessed by heaven. In the twilight of the Shang dynasty's bronze-clad reign, unrest brewed silently in the western fringes of the empire. There, in the shadowed valleys near the Wei River, a tribal people known as the Zhou had long observed the splendor and decadence of their overlords. Though the Shang boasted oracle bones, ritual vessels, and sacrificial rites carved in blood and fire, the Zhou watched with quiet judgment. The Zhou were vassals, yet not meek. They were shepherds of horses, cultivators of grain, but above all keepers of ancestral virtue. Their chieftains traced lineage to the mythical Huangdi, the Yellow Emperor. Their wisdom lay not in fearsome armories, but in diplomacy, loyalty, and foresight. It was King Wen of Zhou, a noble with the demeanor of a sage who first sowed the seed of destiny. Captured by the Shang King dish in a tyrant drunk on cruelty and lust when endured imprisonment, offering humble counsel rather than resistance. But even as he knelt, he plotted the path to revolution. His son, King Wu, would unsheath the sword his father forged in patience. At the fateful Battle of Mai, c. 1046 BCE, the Zhou army surged forward, armed with a righteous cause, and flanked by defected Shang soldiers unwilling to die for a mad king. They clashed beneath heaven's silent eye, and when Dishin perished in flames inside his palace choosing death over surrender, the Zhou emerged not merely as victors, but as heaven's new appointed rulers. So began the Zhou Dynasty, not with divine birth, but with divine approval. 2. The Mandate of Heaven and New Cosmic Order. It was a doctrine unlike any before. The Zhou proclaimed that Qiang, or heaven, was not a god, but a cosmic force of morality and balance. Rulers reigned only if they were just, virtuous, and wise. If they strayed into cruelty or corruption, heaven would revoke its favor and allow rebellion. Thus was born the legendary Mandate of Heaven, Quanming, a pillar of Chinese political philosophy that would shape millennia of dynasties. Unlike divine right in other ancient lands, this mandate was conditional. It was not inherited in blood alone, it was earned and judged continually. Through this belief, the Zhou did more than justify their conquest, they built a moral framework that discouraged tyranny, legitimized rebellion, and enthroned virtue. From then on, floods, famines, eclipses, and rebellion were interpreted as signs of heaven's displeasure. The people watched the skies not for omens of worship, but for proof that a ruler had failed. 3. Western Zhou, the Golden Epoch. The early phase of Zhou rule, known as the Western Zhou 1046 to 771 BCE, was a time of ritual harmony, administrative order, and territorial expansion. The capital at Haojing, near modern-day Xiong, was a city of measured design, ancestral altars, and elegant palaces shaded by cypress groves. Here, kings performed elaborate rites to honor heaven and their forebears, communing with spirits not to gain favor, but to maintain cosmic order. The realm was decentralized yet stable. The Zhou kings granted land to loyal lords, feudal vassals who ruled semi-autonomous regions. In return for allegiance and military service, this Fengjian system wove a web of alliances, kinship, and obligation that held the vast territory together. It was during this period that the Bronze Age in China reached its zenith. Cast vessels bore inscriptions not only of rituals and lineage, but of political treaties, oaths, and historical events. These artifacts were more than tools. They were vessels of memory and legitimacy. The Western Zhou idealized Lear's complex code of ritual, propriety that governed everything from mourning rites to state ceremonies. Order was sacred, and in that sacredness the dynasty found strength. 4. Echoes in bronze art, music, and ritual. Wander into a Western Zhou tomb and you will find bells without tongues, bronze drums, ding cauldrons and chimed stones. These were not ornaments of the dead, but instruments of heaven's voice. The Zhou believed that music and ritual held society in harmony. Each tone, each step of the dance, each libation poured onto the altar carried meaning not for gods, but for the natural order. Bronze casting became both an art and a spiritual act. The inscriptions etched into ritual vessels serve today as one of our richest historical records. They speak of alliances sealed with wine, wars launched with sacred approval, and lands granted in heaven's name. Even war was a ritual, conducted with prescribed conduct, timing, and appeals to heaven. Victory was not glory, it was affirmation of the just. Before we continue, if you're feeling the ancient winds of wisdom stir within you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. Which ancient civilization would you love us to whisper next? Your voice guides this journey through time. Let us know below. 5. Cracks in harmony, the decline of Western Zhou. No empire, no matter how divinely ordained, escapes the slow erosion of time. By the late Western Zhou period, the vassal system that had once held the realm in harmony began to fracture. The lords, enriched by generations of autonomy, grew increasingly independent, their allegiance to the Zhou throne more symbolic than practical. A critical blow came in 771 BCE, in a tale of both tragedy and folly. King Yu of Zhou, enamored with his consort Baoxi, neglected affairs of state and even disinherited his rightful heir to please her. To entertain her, he once lit the emergency beacon fire signals meant to summon noble armies in times of dire threat merely to watch the lords panic and race to the capital. When a real invasion by the Conrong nomads struck shortly after, no one came. The boy who cried wolf had cried once too often. The capital, Haojing, was sacked, and King Yu was killed. His death marked the end of the Western Zhou and the beginning of a new, more fragmented chapter. The Eastern Zhou, 6, Eastern Zhou, fracture and flourish 770 to 56 BCE. The Zhou kings, now weakened and politically neutered, relocated eastward to Luoyang, giving rise to the Eastern Zhou period. Though the dynasty would technically endure for another 5 centuries, its power was nominal. The real authority now rested in the hands of regional warlords. Yet paradoxically, this age of political fragmentation sparked an intellectual and cultural renaissance unrivaled in Chinese history. This era divides further into the sweeping periods, the spring and autumn periods 770–776 BCE, named after the spring and autumn annals of the state of Lu. This time saw over 100 small states, all jostling for dominance. Warfare was ritualized with noble charioteers and formal declarations. But by its end, the bloodshed had lost its poetry. States like Qi, Jin, Chu, Qin, and Lu began to absorb their weaker neighbors, consolidating power. It was during this age that Confucius was born. The Warring States period. For 75 to 21 BCE gone were the days of ceremonial war. The Warring States were brutal, efficient, and innovative. Crossbows replaced chariots. Mass conscription replaced noble militias. Diplomacy became deception, and blood soaked the fields of ambition. 7 major states, Qi, Chu, Yan, Hong, Zhao, Wei, and Qin fought for supremacy. Alliances shifted. Like desert winds, assassinations, espionage, and reforms were daily business. And yet, from this crucible of chaos, ideas flourished. 7. 100 schools of thought, voices of the age. While kings clashed with iron, philosophers clashed with ideas. The Zhou era birthed the 100 schools of thought, a golden age of intellectual exploration. Thinkers wandered from court to court, offering rulers advice, some to build just societies, others to win wars. Among these luminaries, Confucius Kongzi, 551 to 479 BCE, a moralist and traditionalist. He preached a return to the virtues of filial piety, respect, ritual li, and benevolent rule. His Analects became the ethical backbone of Chinese civilization. Laozi, legendary founder of Taoism, he taught the mysterious Tao, the way, emphasizing natural harmony, non-action Wu Wei, and inner stillness. His Tao Te Ching speaks in paradoxes, but flows with timeless wisdom. Mozi, champion of universal love and meritocracy, he rejected ritual extravagance and argued for practical ethics, peace, and a scientific approach to governance. Hon Feizi, architect of legalism, he believed people were inherently selfish and that a ruler must control through strict laws, rewards, and punishments. His ideas would find favor with a state called Qin. These schools were not just philosophy. They were political strategies competing for the soul of China. 8. The Zhou legacy, a dynasty that outlived its power. By 256 BCE, the last Zhou king died in obscurity. The dynasty that had once dethroned the Shang and ruled with heaven's blessing had long since become a puppet of stronger warlords. Yet, remarkably, its legacy endured. It was the Zhou who gave China the mandate of heaven, the feudal structure that mirrored later imperial bureaucracies, the foundation of Confucian order, a written tradition of historical consciousness, the idea that morality, not lineage, legitimizes rule. Even as the Qin rose in blood and fire, even as emperors replaced kings, Zhou ideals lingered in the court, in the classroom, in the mind. The dynasty was gone, but the world it imagined became the template for all Chinese civilization to come. 9. Whispers of the Ancients, a kingdom in echo. The Zhou dynasty may not be adorned with the golden masks of Egypt or the ziggurats of Mesopotamia. Its relics whisper in bronze inscriptions, its cities lost beneath fields and valleys. But its power lies not in what it built, but in what it envisioned. A cosmos ruled by virtue, a society bound by ritual and duty, a ruler judged not by force, but by moral order. Its bones lie scattered across the plains of China, but its breath, its whisper still lingers in the calligraphy of sages, in the measured steps of ritual, in the very architecture of the East. The Zhou were not gods, but they became immortal through thought, through law, through order, and through the eternal mandate of heaven. 10. The fall of Shang and the rise of Zhou. The Shang kings had once spoken with the spirits, but their line grew heavy with indulgence. King Zhou of Shang, their final sovereign, is remembered in legend not as a king, but as a warning. He bathed in wine. He lit meat gardens for pleasure. He built the lake of wine and forest of meat as peasants starved in the fields. It was then that the Zhou, once loyal vassals in the west, took up heaven's silence as a sign. Under King Wen, the foundation was laid. Under King Wu, the rebellion came to life. At the Battle of Mai, chariots clashed like thunder. The Shang forces, many unwilling, defected mid-battle. King Zhou of Shang, surrounded and betrayed, set fire to his palace and vanished in ash. The Zhou did not just seize a throne, they claimed divine approval, and with it, they birthed a concept that would define Chinese rule forevermore. The mandate of heaven. Heaven sees what the people see. Heaven hears what the people hear. The Shujing, Book of Documents, 11. The mandate of heaven, a new political theology. It was revolutionary, this idea that heaven chose rulers not by blood, but by virtue. The Zhou framed their conquest not as ambition, but as necessity. Heaven, they said, had grown weary of Shang decadence. Now, it had turned its face to Zhou. This mandate of heaven would become a cycle. When rulers became corrupt, heaven would signal disapproval through droughts, famines, revolts, and thus, the people were justified in rebellion. It was not a divine right to rule. It was a divine duty, one that could be revoked. And so, in this cosmic contract, the Zhou wrapped legitimacy in moral expectation. China would follow this rhythm for millennia. 12. Western Zhou, the High Age, 1046 to 771 BCE. The early Zhou kings ruled from Haojing, near modern Xi'an, in the fertile plains of the Wei River Valley. They organized their empire through a feudal system, distributing lands to noble families who pledged loyalty. These nobles built walled cities, held court over peasants, and offered grain, warriors, and tribute to the Zhou kings. In turn, they were entrusted with ancestral rights and the defense of civilization's order. The Zhou court, was not opulent, it was sacred. Ceremony and ritual ruled daily life. They used bronze vessels intricately cast to honor the ancestors, each vessel an offering, each inscription a story. May my sons and grandsons treasure this vessel and never forget its meaning. With ritual came music, bells, chimes, zithers, the harmony of heaven made audible. This was a time of cosmic choreography. Every act, from farming to marriage, followed the rites Li that kept society in balance with the natural order. Like what you're hearing, this ancient dance between heaven and earth continues. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your favorite part of Zhou history so far. What other ancient empires would you like us to explore? We read every whisper you send. 13. Decline and collapse of the Western Zhou 1046 to 771 BCE. But no dynasty lasts forever, not even one chosen by heaven. The Western Zhou, though rooted in virtue, began to fray. As generations passed, the king's authority dimmed while regional lords grew bolder and more autonomous. In the distant corners of the Zhou realm, noble houses descendants of royal blood had become kings in all but name. They built their own palaces, minted their own coins, waged wars without the king's blessing. The central court weakened, and as rituals became routine, the spirit behind them faded. Then came a tragedy that shattered the illusion of eternal order. In 771 BCE, during the reign of King Yu, the dynasty fell into farce. He had dismissed his queen, angered her powerful father, the Marquis of Shen, and for the amusement of his concubine Bao Si, lit the beacons of war, those sacred fires meant to summon the vassals in times of peril, just to watch the lords arrive in confusion. When the real danger came, the Quanrong nomads sweeping in from the west, the lords no longer answered. King Yu was slain, the capital of Haojing fell, and with its flames the Western Zhou came to an end. But the dynasty did not die. It migrated. 14. Eastern Zhou and the age of fragmentation 770 to 56 BCE. The Zhou court, weakened but unbroken, re-established itself in Luoyang, farther east. This marked the beginning of the Eastern Zhou period, which historians divide into two grand epochs: Spring and Autumn period 770 to 476 BCE warring, States period 475 to 1 BCE. In name, the Zhou kings still reigned. In truth, they were figureheads, ritual monarchs surrounded by real power brokers. Across the land, once loyal vassals had become dukes, marquises and kings, each ruling independent fiefdoms, each hungering for dominance. 15. Spring and Autumn period 770 to 476 BCE, a time of sages and swords, named after the spring and autumn annals. This age was chaotic but culturally fertile. Over 140 feudal states jostled for control. Warfare became constant, yet ritualized, each state still observing the forms of old, even as they undermined them. But amidst this unrest, giants walked the earth. It was during this time that Confucius was born in the state of Lu 551 to 479 BCE. He wandered from court to court, preaching order through virtue, yearning for a return to the moral clarity of early Zhou. When the Wei Dao is lost, ritual remains. When ritual is lost, only decorum remains. His vision looked backward to the Western Zhou, yet would shape all of China's future. And he was not alone. Laozi, the mystic of the Tao Te Ching, taught the way of the Tao path of effortless harmony. Where Confucius sought order in society, Laozi found peace in letting go. Other thinkers rose too. Wozi, advocating for universal love, legalist philosophers, arguing for strict laws and control. Sunzi, author of The Timeless Art of War. This was not just a time of war, it was a time of intellectual revolution. A true 100 schools of thought flourished. 16. Warring States period for 75 to 1 BCE, the death of the Old World. By the 5th century BCE, only 7 great powers remained: Qin, Chu, Qi, Yan, Han, Zhao and Wei. These were no longer feudal lords. They were kings in every sense, with standing armies, fortified capitals and ambitions of uniting all under heaven. Warfare grew brutal. New technologies like iron weapons, cavalry and mass infantry reshaped the battlefield. The rituals of Zhou, those once sacred rites, were cast aside. The age of gentlemen warriors had ended. Now came the age of total war, and yet, even amid carnage, the dream of unity persisted. State after state fell until only kin remained. 17. The Zhou mandate ends, but echoes remain to 56 BCE. Into 56 BCE, the last Zhou king died. There was no great battle, no rebellion, only silence. The dynasty that had begun in fire and divine justice ended with a whisper, absorbed by the rising Qin Empire, whose brutal efficiency would soon forge the first unified China. But the Zhou legacy did not vanish. Its mandate of heaven would be claimed by every Chinese dynasty that followed, from Han to Tang, Song to Ming. Its rituals and philosophy, especially through Confucianism, would define Chinese governance, education, and ethics for 2 millennia. Even the idea of a moral ruler, judged by his virtue rather than birth, would echo through revolutions, rebellions, and reforms. 18. Legacy. Zhou as the cultural bedrock of China. What made the Zhou endure was not military might, but meaning. They recast kingship as a moral contract. They made ritual and harmony the fabric of statecraft. They inspired generations of thinkers and poets to seek order in chaos and wisdom in tradition. Bronze inscriptions gave way to bamboo. Scrolls. Chariots gave way to cavalry. Feudal lords gave way to emperors. But beneath it all, the Zhou whisper still lingers. In the Confucian classics, in the concept of heaven's mandate, in the enduring balance between duty and destiny.